Have you ever sat in a beautiful restaurant, surrounded by laughter and glowing candlelight, while secretly calculating numbers in your head, hoping the bill won't be more than you can handle? Most people in the room would never notice. But that night, I noticed. And what happened next changed more than just one dinner. The restaurant felt louder than I remembered. Not unpleasantly loud, but full of conversations, clinking glasses, soft music, and the warm hum of celebration. Riverside Lantern had always been that kind of place in downtown Seattle. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. The candles were real wax, not electric imitations. The white tablecloths were pressed perfectly and replaced after every seating. It was the kind of restaurant where people came when the moment mattered. I hadn't been there in 3 years. After the divorce, places like that felt strange to me. Not because I didn't like them anymore, but because luxury suddenly felt complicated. As if enjoying something beautiful meant ignoring the parts of life that had fallen apart. But Mia asked, and when your 8-year-old daughter asks something simple with quiet hope in her voice, you don't say no. It happened one afternoon in November. She was sitting at the kitchen table drawing a snowflake with blue crayons. The drawing had become complicated, lines branching into smaller lines, the kind of detailed effort kids give when they're concentrating hard. She looked up at me and said softly, "Dad, New Year's Eve should be somewhere with candles." That was it. No explanation. No pleading. Just an idea. So I said yes. And that's how we ended up there that night, sitting near the window overlooking Puget Sound. Outside, Seattle shimmered quietly in the winter darkness, lights reflecting off the black water. Inside, couples leaned close across tables, glasses lifted in celebration, and servers moved gracefully through the room. The menu was fixed price, $95 per person. I tried not to think about it too much. Instead, I focused on Mia, who was studying the menu with intense seriousness. Recently, she had developed a fascination with cooking. As a professional chef, that made me proud, and occasionally nervous. "Dad," she said without looking up, "what's an amuse-bouche?" "It's a tiny dish the kitchen sends out before the meal," I explained. "A bite meant to wake up your taste buds." She nodded thoughtfully. "That's smart," she said. "Every meal should start that way." I smiled. I'm 42 years old. I've worked as a chef since I was 24. I started in kitchens that believed the best teachers were heat, pressure, and exhaustion. Places where young cooks learned quickly or didn't last. The kitchens followed the old brigade system, strict hierarchy, long hours, and constant intensity. Respect wasn't given freely. You earned it by arriving before dawn and working until long after everyone else had gone home. For 12 years, I climbed that ladder in Seattle's restaurant scene. Eventually, I became a sous chef at a well-known restaurant. But when Mia was born, everything changed. Restaurant life doesn't fit easily with parenthood. The hours are backwards. You work evenings, nights, holidays, the exact moments families spend together. I tried to make it work for 2 years. I told myself that quality time mattered more than quantity. Then one morning, Mia said something that stopped me cold. "Sometimes, Dad, you're never here." She didn't say it accusingly. She said it like a simple observation, and that made it impossible to ignore. So I made a choice. I left the restaurant world and started working as a private chef, cooking small dinners, catering events, preparing meals for families in their homes. The change allowed me to be there when Mia came home from school. That mattered more than anything else, but the transition wasn't easy. Starting over at 38 meant rebuilding everything: reputation, clients, income. Some months were good, others were uncertain. There were nights I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad writing 2 columns of numbers, what I had and what I needed. Sometimes the gap between them was uncomfortable. That's when you learn a particular skill, doing math silently in public. You learn how to look at a menu and instantly calculate the total. You learn to order the second cheapest wine, not because it's your favorite, but because it gives you breathing room. You learn to smile across the table while quietly deciding whether dessert is financially possible. Most importantly, you learn how to do all of this without anyone noticing. So when I saw her, I recognized the signs immediately. The couple at the table beside us arrived around 7:10. The man entered with confidence. He wore a charcoal blazer and moved like someone comfortable being watched. Later, I would hear someone call him Marcus. He spoke easily, gesturing with his hands, occasionally making comments about the wine list. The woman with him was different. She wore a dark green dress that had clearly been chosen carefully. Her dark hair was pulled back simply, and she wore small silver earrings. She looked elegant, but not relaxed. There's a subtle difference between someone who belongs effortlessly in a place and someone who hopes they do. I noticed it the way chefs notice small details in a kitchen. Years of reading dining rooms had trained me to observe quietly without staring. Marcus talked a lot. She listened. She smiled when appropriate. Asked questions occasionally, but her hands rested on the table with a faint tension, fingers lightly gripping the edges of the menu. Mia noticed first. We had just started our appetizers, beet salad for her, clam chowder for me, when she touched my arm. She didn't speak. She simply glanced sideways. I followed her gaze. The woman had shifted slightly in her chair, creating a little pocket of privacy. Her clutch purse was open in her lap, hidden beneath the table. Inside, she was counting money. Her fingers moved quickly, efficiently. She glanced at the menu, then back to the bills. And in that small moment, her expression changed. The numbers didn't work. She closed the purse and returned it to her lap. Mia leaned toward me and whispered, "Dad, she's counting money." I nodded. "Does she have enough?" Mia asked. I shook my head. Mia set down her fork and looked at me seriously. "Are you going to help her?" That question sounds simple. In theory, the answer is obvious. Of course you help, but how you help matters. If I walked over and offered to pay, I would embarrass her. I would turn her private struggle into a public moment. I knew what that felt like. So I stood up and walked to the service station near the back of the room where a young waiter was organizing plates. His name tag read Owen. "Owen," I said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "The couple at table 11, the woman in the green dress. I'd like to cover their entire dinner." He blinked in surprise. "Everything," I continued. "Whatever they order, wine, dessert, the whole meal." He studied me for a moment. "But please do it quietly," I added. "Tell them it's a complimentary dinner from the restaurant if they ask. I don't want her to feel embarrassed." After a moment, he nodded. "I'll talk to the manager," he said. "But I think we can make that happen." I thanked him and returned to my table. Mia looked up expectantly. "Done?" she asked. "Done." She nodded once and resumed eating her salad. "Good," she said simply. About 15 minutes later, I noticed the change. It was subtle. The woman's shoulders relaxed slightly, dropping perhaps an inch. She laughed, an actual laugh, not the polite kind she had been offering earlier. Then she picked up the wine list. This time, she didn't glance down at her purse. She simply ordered what she wanted. I recognized the feeling instantly. The relief isn't really about the money. It's about something deeper, the freedom to stop calculating, to stop managing the invisible gap between what you have and what you need. For the first time that night, she looked present. Watching that moment unfold quietly across the room was the best part of my evening, even better than midnight. As Mia and I were putting on our coats near the entrance, a voice behind us said softly, "Excuse me." I turned. The woman in the green dress stood there holding her clutch. "I'm sorry to stop you," she said. I didn't confirm anything. I simply said, Everyone deserves a good dinner on New Year's Eve. She hesitated, then said quietly, I only had $5. I know, I replied. She studied my face. Why? She asked. I thought about my notepad at home. About months spent doing the same silent math. Because I recognized it, I said. We talked for about 20 minutes. Her name was Clara. She worked as a paralegal and had a 6-year-old daughter named Lucy. A payroll mistake had left her short. That month, and the correction wouldn't come until January, she had almost stayed home that night. But then she decided she didn't want to begin the year alone. I had a dress, she said. Lucy was safe with a friend. Staying home was a choice, and I didn't want to make that choice, so she came. We exchanged numbers before leaving. In January, we met for coffee, me, Mia, and Clara with Lucy. Within 20 minutes, the girls were on the floor assembling a puzzle together. Weeks passed, walks along the waterfront, conversations, over coffee, ordinary afternoons. One day in February, Clara said something that stayed with me. That dinner was the first time in 3 years, she said, that I didn't calculate the bill. I understood exactly what she meant. Sometimes when the city is quiet and Mia is asleep, I open the drawer where that old notepad still sits. I never throw it away, because it reminds me of something important. In every crowded room there are people doing silent math. People dressed nicely, smiling, participating in the evening, while quietly managing a gap no one else sees. They aren't asking for help. They aren't making a scene. They're simply holding things together. And sometimes, the most meaningful thing you can do isn't rescue them or announce your kindness. Sometimes the most meaningful thing you can do is simply notice. Because the hardest years of our lives often teach us the most valuable skill of all, how to truly see other people. The next morning, the city felt quieter than usual. New Year's Day in Seattle has a strange stillness to it, like the entire place is taking a deep breath after the noise of the night before. The streets outside my apartment were damp from winter rain, and the sky hung low and gray in the way Seattle skies often do in January. Mia sat at the kitchen table eating cereal while swinging her legs under the chair. Do you think she was happy? She asked suddenly. I knew exactly who she meant. I think she was relieved, I said. Mia considered that for a moment. That's almost the same thing, she said. Kids sometimes say things so simply that it makes you realize adults complicate everything. After breakfast, she went back to her drawing. This time it wasn't a snowflake. It was a restaurant with candles on every table. 2 stick figures sat at one table and another person sat at the next one. Above them, she had drawn a speech bubble with the word, "Thank you." I didn't say anything about it. I just smiled and went to clean the kitchen. The following week, life returned to its usual rhythm. Mia went back to school. I returned to work. Private chef life is unpredictable. Some days are busy with clients, others are quiet planning days in the kitchen. On a cold Wednesday afternoon, I stood in a client's kitchen chopping vegetables for a dinner party. As I sliced carrots into neat rounds, my mind wandered back to New Year's Eve, not to the act of paying the bill, but to that moment when Clara's shoulders relaxed. Relief has a physical shape. You can see it when someone finally lets go of a tension they've been carrying. That evening, after Mia had gone to bed, I looked at my phone and saw Clara's number in my contacts. For a minute, I wondered if calling her would feel strange. Then, I reminded myself that we had both chosen to exchange numbers, so I called. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Hi," she said, sounding surprised but warm. We spoke for almost half an hour. The conversation was easy, the kind that moves naturally from topic to topic. Work, the weather, our daughters, and eventually the chaotic first week back after the holidays. At one point she laughed and said, "Lucy asked if Mia was real or if I made her up." "Why would she think that?" I asked. "Because apparently no one her age knows that much about pasta water." I laughed. Mia had spent the previous week explaining the importance of salting pasta water, like the ocean, a phrase she had heard me repeat many times. Before we hung up, I asked if she would like to meet for coffee sometime. She paused for a moment, then said yes. The following Saturday, we met at a small cafe in Capitol Hill. It was the kind of place with mismatched chairs, warm lighting, and the smell of freshly ground coffee filling the room. Mia and Lucy met for the first time that morning. Lucy was small, with dark hair and sharp eyes that examined everything carefully. When she saw Mia, she tilted her head slightly the way children do when they're deciding whether someone will be interesting. Within minutes, they were both sitting on the floor assembling a puzzle the cafe kept for kids. Clara and I watched them from our table. "Children are faster at making friends than adults," she said. "That's because they don't overthink it," I replied. We talked for almost 2 hours that morning. Not about New Year's Eve. That part of the story didn't need to be revisited. Instead, we talked about ordinary things, neighborhoods, favorite bakeries, books our daughters liked. The strange psychology of Seattle winters, when daylight disappears early and people have to consciously remind themselves to go outside. When we finally left the cafe, the girls insisted on walking together down the block before going home. Lucy held Mia's hand as if they had known each other for months. The weeks that followed developed into a comfortable routine. Sometimes we met for coffee, sometimes we took the girls to the park, sometimes we just walked through the city and talked. Seattle in winter isn't a city of bright colors. Everything becomes shades of gray and silver. The sky blends into the water, and the buildings seem softer in the diffused light. But there's a quiet beauty in that softness. One afternoon in February, we decided to walk along the waterfront. The air was cold enough for scarves, but not cold enough to keep people indoors. A few joggers passed by, bundled in running gear. A couple walked a large dog that looked happier than anyone else on the pier. Mia and Lucy walked ahead of us, stepping carefully along the uneven pavement near the water's edge. Lucy complained about her boots within the first 5 minutes. Mia immediately launched into an enthusiastic explanation about wool socks. "They keep your feet warm even when they get wet," she said confidently. She spoke with the authority of someone delivering a scientific lecture, describing moisture-wicking fibers and insulation properties. Lucy listened quietly for a while before finally shrugging. "Okay," she said. Clara and I followed a few steps behind them, watching the girls. After a while, Clara said quietly, "I keep thinking about that night." "The dinner?" I asked. "Not exactly the dinner," she said. "More the moment afterward." She paused, looking out across the water. When I stopped counting, I nodded. She continued. "I didn't realize how long it had been since I'd been somewhere without calculating everything in my head. That kind of calculation isn't just about money. It becomes a habit, a background process that never turns off. Even when things improve financially, your brain keeps doing the math automatically. It fades eventually," I said. "Does it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It takes time, but it fades." She seemed to think about that as we walked. Ahead of us, Mia grabbed Lucy's hand to help her step across a large crack in the pavement. Lucy accepted the help with a serious expression, as if pretending she hadn't needed it. Clara smiled when she saw it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You've already said that." "I know," she replied. "But I mean it every time." I shrugged slightly. "You didn't have to do it," she added. "That's true," I said. "So why did you?" I thought about that question carefully. Finally, I said, "Because someone once did something similar for me." She turned to look at me, curious. So I told her. Years earlier, during one of those difficult months after my career change, I had been working a small catering event, a dinner party for 12 people in a beautiful house overlooking the water. At the end of the evening, the host pulled me aside and handed me an envelope. Inside was payment. And something extra. When I tried to return the extra money, he shook his head and said something I never forgot. Consider it a buffer, he said. Everyone needs one sometimes. That extra payment had covered my rent that month. Clara listened, quietly. So you passed the buffer forward, she said. Something like that? She smiled softly. The girls eventually wandered back toward us. Can we get hot chocolate? Mia asked. Lucy immediately agreed, so we found a small cafe near the pier and ordered 2 hot chocolates and 2 coffees. The girls sat by the window, watching ferries move slowly across the water. Clara looked at them and said, almost to herself, "It's strange how one small moment can change the direction of things." "Which moment?" I asked. "The moment someone notices," she said. I understood exactly what she meant. Months passed. Clara's payroll issue was corrected in January. Then, unexpectedly, she received a promotion at her firm. The raise made a noticeable difference in her life. She told me about it one morning while we were drinking coffee. "I don't want to celebrate too loudly," she said carefully, "just in case." "You should celebrate loudly," I told her. She laughed. Meanwhile, Mia and Lucy had developed an elaborate imaginary game involving toy horses, building blocks, and a complicated system of rules neither Clara nor I fully understood. Why? Stop trying to follow the logic after a while. Sometimes at night, after finishing a catering job and cleaning my kitchen, I still think about the years when everything was uncertain. I still have that old notepad where I wrote my monthly numbers. I keep it in the back of a drawer. Not because I enjoy remembering the struggle, but because it reminds me of what those years taught me. Hard times sharpen your attention. When you've lived through months of careful budgeting, you begin to notice the tiny adjustments people make, the small hesitations, the quick calculations behind someone's smile. One evening, Mia asked me a serious question. "What did you learn from the hard years?" she said. I thought about it for a while before answering. "I learned to pay attention," I said. "To what people say?" she asked. "No," I replied. "To what they are actually doing." She considered that. "Is that why you noticed Clara?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She nodded thoughtfully. "That's a useful skill," she said. She was right, because in every crowded restaurant, every party, every busy room filled with laughter, there are people quietly doing math in their heads. They are dressed nicely. They're smiling. They're participating in the moment just like everyone else. But beneath the table, hidden from view, they're trying to make the numbers work. They're not asking for help. They're not creating drama. They're simply managing a difficult situation with quiet determination, and sometimes the most important thing anyone can do is simply notice, not to embarrass them, not to turn their private struggle into a public display, just to see them, to understand what might be happening behind the smile. Because the hardest years in life don't just teach survival, sometimes they teach something even more valuable. They teach you how to truly see the people around you. Spring arrived slowly in Seattle, the way it always does, without fanfare. The rain didn't disappear all at once. It simply softened. The gray skies lifted a little higher each week, and small patches of sunlight began appearing in the afternoons like quiet promises. Life had settled into a rhythm. Mia and I had our routines again. School mornings, homework at the kitchen table, the occasional debate about pasta techniques that she insisted on treating like scientific experiments. Clara and Lucy had become part of that rhythm too. At first, our meetings were casual. Coffee here, a walk there, the girls playing together, while Clara and I talked about ordinary things. But over time, something comfortable formed between us. Not rushed, not dramatic, just steady. One Saturday morning in early March, Mia woke me up earlier than usual. "Dad," she said, shaking my shoulder gently, "you said we might go to the farmer's market today." I checked the clock. 8 in the morning. Markets. Don't open for another hour, I said groggily. But Lucy might come, she replied. That explained everything. We met Clara and Lucy at the small neighborhood market that set up every weekend in a nearby park. It wasn't large, but it had everything you'd want. Fresh bread, vegetables, local honey, flowers that smelled like spring. The girls ran ahead immediately, stopping at every stall that offered samples. Clara and I followed behind them. You created a monster, she said jokingly. Lucy now critiques pasta like a restaurant critic. That's Mia's influence, I replied. I just started it. We stopped at a bakery stand selling rustic loaves made with rye flour. The baker handed out small slices with butter. Clara tasted one and raised her eyebrows. That's dangerously good, she said. Bread like this is why people fall in. Love with baking, I said. We bought a loaf and kept walking. The girls eventually stopped at a flower stall where Lucy became fascinated with a bucket of bright yellow tulips. They look like sunshine, she said. Clara smiled and bought a small bundle. As we continued walking, Clara glanced at the flowers in her hand. I used to buy flowers all the time, she said casually. Before Lucy was born. What changed? Priorities, she said simply. When money gets tight, flowers are one of the first things to disappear. She paused for a moment. But lately, she added, lifting the tulips slightly, I've been bringing them back. That sentence stayed with me. Sometimes recovery in life doesn't happen through big, dramatic moments. Sometimes it's as simple as buying flowers again. The girls spent the rest of the morning running between stalls while Clara and I carried our bags of vegetables and bread. At one point, Mia came running back toward us. Dad, she said excitedly, Lucy thinks honey comes from bees' stomachs. Clara laughed. That's a reasonable assumption, she said. Mia looked horrified. No, it's nectar. The girls ran off again, continuing their debate. Clara shook her head. They've known each other 3 months and already argue like sisters. That's probably a good sign, I said. Later that afternoon, we returned to my apartment. Mia and Lucy immediately disappeared into the living room to continue their elaborate imaginary game with building blocks and toy horses. Clara stood in the kitchen watching them for a moment. They look happy, she said. They are, I replied. She turned to me. So are we, I think. There was a gentle honesty in the way she said it, not a dramatic declaration, just an observation. That evening, after the girls had finally exhausted themselves and fallen asleep on opposite ends of the couch, Clara and I sat quietly at the kitchen table. The apartment was peaceful. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Clara traced the rim of her coffee cup with her finger. You know, she said slowly, I almost didn't come to that restaurant. I looked up. I had already decided to stay home, she continued. I even changed out of the dress once. Really? Yes. But something in me just refused. She smiled slightly. It felt like if I stayed home again, I might start believing that was the only place I belonged. I nodded. Sometimes the smallest decisions carry the most weight. Going out, making a call, accepting an invitation. Clara looked toward the living room where the girls were sleeping. I'm glad I changed my mind. So am I said. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, Mia came home from school unusually quiet. She sat at the kitchen table and stared at her homework for several minutes before speaking. Dad, she said, can I ask you something serious? Of course. There's a girl in my class, she began. She forgot her lunch today. I waited. So I shared mine, Mia continued. But she didn't want anyone else to see. She looked up at me, with the same thoughtful expression she'd had that night in the restaurant. Why do people hide things like that? It was a big question for an 8-year-old. I leaned back in my chair and thought carefully before answering. Because sometimes people are afraid of how others will see them, I said. Even when they've done nothing wrong. Mia frowned. Slightly. That doesn't seem fair. No, I agreed. It isn't. She was quiet for a moment. Did that happen to Clara? I nodded. Yes. And you helped her without telling everyone. That was the idea. Mia seemed satisfied with that explanation. Good, she said. Then she went back to her homework. Children often understand kindness more naturally than adults. They don't complicate it with ego or attention. They simply see a problem and want to help. Later that evening, Clara called. I heard Lucy tried to explain honey production to her teacher today, she said, laughing. Let me guess, I replied. Mia corrected her. Immediately. We both laughed. Conversations like that had become normal between us. Easy, unforced. A few months earlier, we had been strangers sitting at neighboring tables. Now our lives were slowly weaving together, not through dramatic moments, through ordinary days. Spring continued to unfold around the city. Cherry blossoms appeared in neighborhoods and parks. The sunlight lasted longer in the evenings. One Saturday, we returned to the waterfront where Clara and I had first talked about that dinner. The girls ran ahead again, chasing each other along the pier. Clara leaned on the railing beside me and looked out at the water. You know something? She said. What? I still think about that moment when I stopped counting. I smiled. I think it changed something in my brain, she continued. Not just financially, emotionally. How so? It reminded me that life doesn't have to be constant survival. She glanced toward Mia and Lucy, laughing together. There's room for joy, too. I nodded slowly. That's an important thing to remember. She looked at me thoughtfully. Did you always believe that? No, I admitted. I had to learn it the hard way. We stood there quietly for a few moments, watching the water ripple beneath the pier. Finally, Clara said something that surprised me. Do you think there are people doing the math right now? Probably, I said. In restaurants? Yes. At coffee shops? Definitely, she sighed softly. I wish there was an easy way to help everyone. I shook my head. There isn't. So what do we do? I thought about that question carefully. Then I said something simple. We notice. She nodded slowly. Sometimes noticing is the beginning of everything. As the sun began to set, the girls ran back toward us, breathless from running. Can we get ice cream? Lucy asked. Clara laughed. In March? Please, Mia added. I looked at Clara. She shrugged playfully. Why not? She said. So we walked together toward a small ice cream shop near the pier. 4 people sharing a simple moment on an ordinary evening. And as we sat there with melting cones and the sound of the water nearby, I thought about how strange life can be. One quiet decision, one unnoticed act of kindness, one moment of paying attention. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the direction of a story. Because in the end, the most powerful thing we learn during our hardest years isn't how to survive, it's how to see, and once you truly see people, really notice them, you begin to understand something important. Everyone is carrying numbers in their head. Everyone is managing something unseen. But sometimes, just knowing someone else notices can make the burden lighter, and sometimes that small shift is enough to start something new.